In this section, I'm going to talk about the transport and metronome controls, starting with the transport bar, which is located at the lower portion of your project window, and I'm just going to reposition it so that we can see it a little bit more easily. And then let's start with the controls on the left-hand side of the transport bar. I won't need to show you what these do right now. I just want you to see how you can configure the transport bar. There are controls for the delay compensation right here. There's also the common recording modes and their functions right here. So if you drop a menu down, then you'll see all of the different options under that menu. But if you want to be able to see what mode you're in, you can see these little ellipses that are vertical. And if you hover over it, it turns orange. When you click on that, it actually opens up more of those controls so that you can see what they say and what they are currently set to. So the controls themselves will not change, it's just that you'll be able to see them. Same is true with the audio recording modes and the MIDI recording modes. And to close those up, you can just hit those little ellipses again to close all of those different controls. Next, we have the locator controls, and I'll talk more about locators in a separate video. But here you can see where the positions of the left and right locators are, as well as the ability to locate to one of the locators simply by clicking either the left or the right buttons for the locators. Next, we have the punch in and punch out controls. The little lock icon right here actually locks the punch in and punch out locations to the same positions as the locators. So if you turn that little padlock off, then you can have separate punch in and punch out locations that are separate from the locators. And if you want to see where those positions are, as far as the bars and beats, click on the ellipse and you'll see that there's a separate location for the punch in and one for the punch out. Then I'll just close those up. And then we have the four most common transport control buttons right here, starting with the cycle mode, stop, play, and record. But there are more transport buttons than that. So to see those, you'd click the ellipsis once, and then you'll be able to see the go to previous and go to next marker buttons. And if you press the ellipse again, then you'll get the fast forward and rewind buttons. And I'll close those up. Then we have the retrospective recording button insert right here. And we have a time display that is currently set to bars and beats. But you can change that time display to display different timings, including things like bars and beats, seconds, time codes, samples, and more. And if you wanted another time display, you can click on that ellipse. Now we can have two differently configured time displays. Our first time display is set to bars and beats. Our second one is set to time code so that we have a readout of the actual real time. So I'm going to close that. And then we have our metronome options. So there's the activate tempo track on and off button right here. We have the tempo setting and the meter or time signature settings right here. And I'll talk more about those in a moment. If we click on the ellipse, then we'll hide the meter control. So click on that again to reveal it. And then we have the metronome enable and disable. And if you hit the edit button next to that, then it will open the metronome setup window, which I will again talk about in a moment. There's an ellipse here. When you click on that, then you have the activate count in on or off button. And we'll close that. Then we have the MIDI input and output activity lights, as well as the audio input and output VU meters. And if we click on the ellipse, you'll be able to change the output level control right here on a fader. And then I'm going to close that up. Finally, we have the setup button. When you click the setup button, it allows you to see what components you have visible on your transport bar. So you can add things like the system performance meter or the markers and so forth. And there are two other ways to access the transport controls. One way is to go to the transport pull-down menu and choose transport panel, which is a separate transport panel that you can put on any monitor, and you can configure it separately because it has its own separate setup. So you could put more or fewer things on the transport panel. I'm going to type F2 to remove that from the window. And finally, in the toolbar at the top of the window, you can also add the transport control buttons by right or control clicking on the toolbar and then choosing transport controls. That will add the transport buttons to the toolbar. You can also access all of the other transport buttons simply by clicking on that ellipse as well. And next, I'll show you the numeric keypad.